Hello everyone and welcome to my full video conversation with President Thomas Kunkel. He is currently the president of St. Norbert College and has held this position for 9 years. During his time at St. Norbert College, he has overseen $100 million of development. I can personally vouch for how much I've seen the campus change for the good in the past 4 years, and much of this is attributed to President Kunkel's leadership. Now, before coming to St. Norbert College, President Kunkel was the dean at the journalism school at the University of Maryland. Before this, he worked as a journalist, having pieces featured in the New Yorker, and he's published several books. In our conversation, we discussed the use and function of college as tuition costs continue to rise. We especially dove into the value of liberal arts institutions in times like today. We also talked about how to have civil discourse and how President Kunkel encourages open conversation in his own life and on campus. Now, this hasn't been easy in the midst of having speakers on campus such as Gloria Steinem and Donald Trump that were incredibly polarizing. President Kunkel discusses how he navigated having these individuals on campus and responded to the critics in the community and outside the Green Bay area. We also talk about what has made him personally successful, and 2 keys he said to his success are skepticism and a healthy sense of insecurity. If you don't have time for the whole 50-minute video right now, I also have separate video clips that are about 3 to 5 minutes long on specific parts of our conversation. Those will be linked below. And if you prefer to listen rather than watch, I will be releasing a podcast version of this conversation in about a week that will include a bit more background information and research to supplement our conversation. But without further ado, here is my full conversation with President Thomas Kunkel. First question I want to ask you is about just your duties as president and how you describe the role, because I see you in so many places across campus, whether it's just eating lunch with faculty or going to sporting events. Like, how would you describe what you have to do?
Well, for one thing, I should start by saying it's a great job. Don't get me wrong, it's a lot of work. It's a hard job. It's one of those jobs that if you're awake, you're working because you, in some way, you're sort of the manifestation of the institution. Not to sound too highfalutin, but I remember early in my time, I was, I'd been president maybe a month, and it was a Saturday, and I had shorts and a T-shirt on and a baseball hat or something. I was getting ready to go out to get my car. I was just going to run to the grocery or something, and I get grabbed from behind, and it's Deb, and she said, "Where do you think you're going?" And I said, "I'm just going to run to the grocery to pick something up." She goes, "Not looking like that."
Oh.
So, oh yeah, and she was right. But as for the job itself, I think there's been a big transformation in the job of college presidents. Until maybe 30 or 40 years ago, the college president was kind of just sort of you have a faculty member, and then you get faculty members that manage other faculty, and they become deans, and they become provosts, and then eventually one of a provost might become a president. A president of a college was just sort of like the most elevated faculty member in a way. It's not that simple, but that it was a strong tradition of people coming through the ranks of the academic side. But colleges as organizations look a lot more like companies, certainly now. And so the position of president has evolved a lot, and today a college president is basically the CEO of a complex organization. And so my job, if you look at the job description and compare it to the provost, my job actually looks a whole lot more like the CEO of one of the major companies in town. Because you're doing, yes, you've got your product, which in our case is education, but we're doing, a lot of my job is about communications, a lot of it is about marketing, there's a lot of consensus building, we've got, a lot of it is about HR, and you're dealing with, human beings and the problems, that obtain there. You're doing a lot of work in the community, including external relations with other organizations. So it's just, it's evolved, and again, you're basically the CEO of a complicated institution that just happens to be about education.
Mm-hmm. So with that, there's no off time with this job. How have you dealt with that? Was that a shock, or did you anticipate that coming in?
Oh, I knew, and most of the jobs I've had, I've been in management one way or another for a long time, so, you just you work hard. I mean, that's a part of it. So that's a given. But one thing I did, because I'd never been I've been a dean at the University of Maryland, which for folks that might be seeing this sort of think about, it's like Maryland's version of Madison, the University of Maryland at College Park, their big research main campus. But I'd never been a college president, and so I actually, before I started here, I sat down with about 6 college presidents that I either knew or knew of that I respected, and just say, tell me what I need to know about being a college president, what news I can use. It was great. It was one of the best things I did, and of course I got a lot of different perspectives, but one of the things that they all said was, make sure you're shepherding some time for yourself, for you and your wife, for you and your family, a little bit of downtime, getaway time, mental health time, however you want to define it. It's much easier said than done because I could, without ever leaving campus, I could be busy 365 days a year, 24 hours a day with things that are going on. That's one of the neat things about it. But you do have to try and find that time. It's a balance, and I'd give myself probably a B- on that over the years. But then, all my children are grown and with lives of their own. I know college presidents that are younger that they still actually have children at home. I can't imagine. I can't imagine trying to do that balance, But everything in life is a balance, and this is just the balance that you have to strike with this job.
And working, in a college setting, I think there's a lot of skepticism surrounding the value of college as costs increase. Yeah. What do you think, just starting off generally with going to college, what do you think is the value of having a college education today?
Well, there's lots of values. I mean, the most important thing about going to college is that, people, you just need to keep, it doesn't matter who you are or what you do, you need to keep learning. Everybody, to be the best Nora you can be, to be the best Tom I can be, you have to keep learning, you have to keep pushing yourself, you have to keep trying to stay current, you have to keep self-educating. So there has always been great value in going to college just to become a better, more thoughtful, more educated person. But then, we tend to think about this more in the context of, professional value and how much money you can make, and you need to take care with that because you should try to do a career that meets your passions so that you enjoy what you're doing. But the fact of the matter is that, yes, college has gotten more expensive, and the costs have far outstripped just inflation generally. There's reasons for that. But it's also demonstrated that it's the best thing you can do in terms of your earning power. So, if we grow up together and I go to college and you don't, over the course of my life, if I get a college degree and you don't, I'll make $1 million more than you at least. If I go on to get a master's degree of some kind, I'll probably make more like $1.5 million than you will. If I go on to be a lawyer, or if I go on to get an advanced degree, I'll probably make $2 to $3 million more than you. I mean, so there's a strong value proposition anyway. But but the main thing is that the other thing that people don't think about, you try and monetize everything. You talk to any employer out there today, and you ask them, what are you looking for in your young talent? And they say, we're looking for people who can communicate, who can think critically, who can collaborate, work well in group environments, and that's what liberal arts colleges do. That's basically our job description. So yes, I think in our case, about 1/4 of our students graduate with no debt. About 3/4 will graduate with some debt. The average debt is around $30,000. That's a lot of money, but it's also about the cost of a new car. But if you think about what it's going to mean to you in terms of where it positions you for the rest of your life, it's still a pretty good deal, I think.
And I think just the interpersonal interaction I have here has been so critical. And that's something that's hard to quantify. And like you said, people want numbers. They want to see, okay, how much more money am I going to make? Thinking about those irreplaceable experiences that you have that cause so much growth as a person too. And I think a lot of that happens in a small college setting too, and being at a liberal arts school with an emphasis on conversation in the classroom.
Well, there's lots to consider. I mean, one of the things that we sell is if you go to St. Norbert, for starters, you're going to graduate, and you're going to graduate in 4 years. If you go to the public institutions, and they're fine institutions, but a lot of people don't graduate, and in the ones who do, you might graduate in 5.5 years, you might graduate in 6 years. And so again, if we grow up together and you go to St. Norbert and I go to Madison, say, chances are that you're going to get out at least a year before I will, and maybe even more. So you're going to be in the workforce sooner, starting your career sooner, earning money back sooner to pay off your debt sooner, and so on. So that's a strong value proposition also. But again, the point you make is the apt one. I mean, you really want to go to college primarily to round out who you are, how you think, how you approach the world, to become a better, stronger, more thoughtful person. And you go to a place like St. Norbert, and there's lots of St. Norberts out there. From the first day you're here, you're in classes with our very best faculty. You don't have to wait 2 or 3 years to get an actual faculty member, to teach one of your classes. And chances are your classes are going to be pretty small. Some of them are going to be very small. You're going to have personal relationships with your teachers. They're going to be helping you get the internships. They're going to be writing the letters to get you into grad school. And in many cases, they're going to be people that you're circling back to years later just to say, hey, Dr. V, or whatever, guess what, I got this job, or thanks for, opening this door. These are relationships that often last a lifetime. Yeah.
And I think what you learn in the classroom, this is how I always reason with it, like you can learn that independently, but the experiences you have, you can't get on your own.
Right.
That's the value of it. So what do you think in terms of the balance of ideas at a liberal arts institution or any college in general? I know there's been, controversies over just my time here, the last 4 years, about having speakers on campus, everyone from Gloria Steinem to Donald Trump visiting. And obviously there's a difference there in people who agree and disagree,
yes,
to say it mildly. How do you balance, well, first of all, you as a president, how do you navigate those difficult periods where you have to balance those things?
Well, that's gotten harder. That's always been a challenge for higher education. But it's certainly, until fairly recently, there was a general consensus in the nation that among civilized people that colleges are a place. They are about ideas. That's what colleges are, and so so part of that responsibility is that you bring people onto campus that have different perspectives, and it doesn't mean you necessarily agree with everybody. I don't agree with much of what Donald Trump says, but we have a long-standing policy of allowing bona fide political candidates to come to campus to talk about their ideas. We think it's part of our contribution to the public dialogue and the public discourse. But it's but with the culture wars, the political wars, the deepening divide between segments of our society, colleges have become kind of caught in the crosshairs now, and so it's much tougher, and it's complicated immensely by social media and the internet. When we had you mentioned when Gloria Steinem was here, we lost track. But we probably had at least 10,000 people that wrote, called, emailed, one way or another. Many of them saying, fantastic, good on you, way to go. More saying, how dare you, and how could you, and of course, I'd venture to say 95% of those people couldn't find De Pere, Wisconsin on a map if their life depended on it. They just heard about it, somebody say, hey, did you see this? What's happening at this college in Wisconsin? This is outrageous. So make sure you sign this internet petition, sort of thing. Yeah. That's fine, but it's just helping further this shrill sense in the country that I think is it's not a good moment for our country, and colleges are in the middle of it, but it's imperative that we navigate it, to kind of get back to your question, because if we can't have legitimate public discourse on the college campus and you can't have a free exchange of ideas, where can you? Mm-hmm. In many ways, we're almost the last bastion of that kind of civility, or one hopes, and there's no hope for America or anything else unless thoughtful people can't have dialogue. So we've got to hang on to that responsibility and that obligation harder than ever in an environment that's harder than ever. I think it makes that piece of what we do all the more important. It's exhausting. I mean, nobody likes, getting punched all the time, but it's, it's the price you pay, to do what, people expect you to do. You have to deal with it, and you have to, any institution, any person, you set out your values and your principles, and then you try to adhere to them. And at the end of the day, that's your safe harbor. That's what you have to rely on to get you through.
What do you think is the value of being confronted with something that you really disagree with or that shocks you?
Well, that's a great question. I think because people never ask themselves enough, why do I believe something? There's a reason that we test things. I mean, kids test their parents. A scientist, has a breakthrough finding and they put it out, and then other scientists test it to see whether they can replicate the results. That that's the sign. One sign of an educated person is that they are willing to talk about their ideas and their beliefs and to put them up against other people and to have them be challenged and to see if they hold up. I mean, it's the same thing with your religious beliefs. If I really wanted to, I could believe that the sun rises in the west every day. Okay, and I could really believe that in my soul. But if I put it out to be tested, I learn that it doesn't hold up. So I think that, again, part of what that's a big part of a college. There's a reason that college happens at a point in a person's life when they're 17, 18, 19, 20. Because everything about their life and their perspective is coming to a more mature point. They've had enough life experience to start making, decisions and value judgments of their own, and to see that other people believe this. Well, what do I think about that? Is there merit in what they believe? And in a class, if a professor just says something flat out about why did the Civil War start? Well, that may be true, but I think, it's this. It's an important part of, it's a very formative time, in your life, and so that's crucial to this formula as well. And so I just think that, again, a college, among other things, is a bazaar of ideas. That's why we're here. And so institutions that close off whole sides of perspectives, that are only willing, if you're a conservative institution and you're only willing to have conservative thinking people in, that might make you feel better about yourself, and it might validate your position, but you're doing it inside, a silo, and that's just a really unhealthy thing, unhealthy for you and unhealthy for society. We, among other things, we are trying to educate our students into thinking critically, which means taking in all the evidence and try to evaluate for themselves what they think is correct and true and what's not. And that's as important as your geometry and your language and everything else that you're learning here, maybe more so.
I think one of the most impactful experiences I had here was actually when George Yancey came to speak. I think that was my sophomore year. And it was one of those conversations or just presentations that was so unfamiliar and just such a new opinion, and it sticks with me. Like, even really powerful speakers that we have on campus, it's easy for that to dissipate because it jives with what you already think. So I don't know, that really, I think there's such value in that as well. But how do you approach conversations with people that you really disagree with? Maybe you can give us some tips.
Well, that's a good question. Well, I mean, sometimes I guess I'm in conversation with people that I know I'm going to disagree with. More often than not, I may not realize I'm going to disagree with somebody, and until I, we fall into, by accident, into some aspect of conversation. It's a little tricky. I mean, in part because when you're a college president, you're a pretty large part diplomat.
Yeah, yeah.
You are sort of the face of the institution, and so any conversation ultimately can reflect back to the institution. And so, and maybe some of this too is for 25 years before I was a college president, I was a journalist. Well, kind of like college president, as journalists, you're sort of in the business of not letting people know what your own personal politics are, because you're supposed to be objective. So my whole life I've sort of been trained, not to just throw myself into like super deep political conversations, because it's professionally it was unwarranted. I try to. I mean, I've always enjoyed challenging conversations with people if I know that they're open to dialogue, because that's fun. I remember I was talking to a friend of mine the other day that I go back all the way to high school with, and she was reminding me, she got so upset with me one day because we were arguing in class, and I don't even remember what it was, she didn't either, but she was arguing one point and I was arguing the diametric opposite point, and she was getting so mad at me because I couldn't see why I was so wrong-headed. And so afterward, she said, "I can't believe that you actually believe that." And I said, "I don't believe that."
Mm-hmm.
And she said, "Well, what do you mean you were arguing?" I said, "Yeah, I was arguing because I like to argue. I don't believe it."
Yeah.
And so, so then she was upset with me because I didn't seem to have any principles. But that wasn't it at all. I just like to argue, and that was one of the reasons that I went into journalism, because I'm not a cynical person, but I'm a skeptical person.
Yeah.
And so, and when you go into journalism, you learn fairly quickly that you ask a lot of questions, because if you really want to know, you need to probe, and usually what people think isn't necessarily what they first say. Mm-hmm. So, I'm kind of walking around your question here. I thoroughly enjoy vigorous conversations with people that I respect. People that I don't respect, and that would include a lot of people that just reflexively feel like their way is the right way or the highway. Why bother? It's just, life's too short.
Yeah.
So so you're always kind of doing a quick triage. Is there any point to this conversation?
Yeah.
I mean, many of these people that wrote us about Gloria Steinem, I'm not going to convert. If they were alums or people that were close to the college that I knew, I actually took a lot of time to talk and to write about why we did. I said, I know I'm not going to persuade you, but this is why we did it. And people do appreciate that. Mm-hmm. But the people that were just responding to an internet petition, fine. That's their right, but it doesn't mean I have to use up any more of my time, trying to acknowledge it.
Mm-hmm. What you were saying about if the other party is closed off, that's why I think it's so frustrating today. I mean, especially in a political context, because with the whole idea of like echo chambers on both sides, right, and how people are just unwilling to recognize the validity of another person's perspective. The problem is, if that closes down conversations, which I tend to do as well, because I think, what's the point? How is that even going to get better?
Well, that's a good point. It's a fair point. I think, I'm not sure that sort of one-on-one, at least with my generation, we are who we are. Mm. I mean, so folks, for instance, who keep thinking that maybe President Trump might change, he's not going to change. He's a 70-year-old man. He's fully baked. He is what he is.
Fully baked.
And I'm a nearly 62-year-old man. I'm fully baked. I am who I am. What I think will change, which is not to say that we abdicate our obligation to try and do better. Of course, we all need to try and do better. But I don't think the current state of the country in terms of political discourse is going to really change until it's more like your generation, the millennials and the next group coming, that are going to hold more sway with what's happening in the country. And I'm very hopeful about that, because you're seeing, you guys are seeing a lot of this nonsense. You're not seeing the value in it. In fact, you're seeing the lack of value in it. And you're not so doctrinaire, you're not so dogmatic, you tend to have a little more complex views about things than I think people maybe give you credit for. So I'm very hopeful that, you know, my daughters and my son-in-law's generation is going to help lead the way to a kinder, more, you know, congenial, collegial sort of environment. I mean, you know, we think we're living in a special moment. In some ways we are, but on the other hand, you know, there's a 400-year history in America. We've always had times like this where we politically kind of go to different corners and have at it. I mean, we actually went to war with each other.
Yeah.
So it's in our DNA. But eventually, a reconciliation tends to happen because people finally realize that you have to. And I think that will happen again here. I just don't hold out a lot of hope that my generation will be leading the way. I'm very hopeful that your generation will.
I want to ask you more about millennials, and especially witnessing this transition that occurs from college into the workforce or into grad school. How would you advise students at this stage to balance being realistic in terms of money, expectations for starting a stable career, and also valuing their happiness and their personal fulfillment? Because that's something that I'm trying to navigate right now as well.
It's interesting. Well, for starters, I think your generation gets a bit of a bad rap, as I said. I mean, all the old farts. Now I'm officially in that category. I mean, it's always there's always sort of the kids nowadays sort of stuff. I mean, I certainly remember it when I was your age. So I mean, that's always with us. But I will say, and so I think, I've been in the 9 cohorts of students that have come through here in my time. I mean, I'm really knocked out. I think they're terrific young men and women. Great values, work hard, like to have a good time, but have a general balance about life. You do what you say. You're trustworthy. You show up. Lots of great qualities. I think in general, it's interesting. If there's a flaw, I do think stereotypes arise for a reason. And there are some members of your generation that I think maybe are, worried maybe too much a little bit about the life part of the work-life balance. Up until 10 years ago, I mean, it was mostly the other way. So when I was a young professional, and then when I was a supervisor, I worried that too many young people, it was all about work. And one of the things that I've been telling people for 30 years is, remember, your job is not your life. Your life is your life. The job is important, but your life is important too. Sometimes I would actually like to see with some of your cohort a little more emphasis on the work.
On the work.
On the work part, because it is important. I mean, you need to have a good job and means to be able to afford a high quality of life that you want. But the balance is crucial, and I do think it's still the case that probably too many young people, they're anxious to get in the work environment, so they're doing 18 hours a day and burning the candle at all 9 ends, and that's fine to a point. But you do have to make sure, especially if you get married and have kids, that your work is not consuming you, because it's not your life. It is your job. But that balance, it is important. The key thing I would say is that try to go into a line of work that you have a passion for. Because one thing you find fairly early is that if you are pursuing a career that just you wake up one day and you find it's just not interesting to me, or it's not speaking to me, or whatever. But that can really become a grind in a hurry. That really can become drudgery, and then you get bitter and.
Yeah.
So even if it means a little less money or taking a risk, try to follow your passion if you can. I mean, the best jobs in the world are those that kind of combine, a professional challenge with something that really addresses, your heart issues. And easier said than done. But if it means taking another year or two to try and keep seeking, or maybe it's graduate school or whatever, you don't have to have it figured out the minute you grab the diploma.
Yeah.
You can take a little time and still still try and figure it out. It's more important that you get that decision right than it is that you try and resolve it quickly.
Yeah. And something that our last year's graduation speaker, commencement speaker, said that really stuck with me is just like at this stage your risk currency is so low.
Right.
So you can make these mistakes now, and that's why I think there's a big sense of urgency right now, because if you make the wrong decision, you lose your chance in a way. So there's like a weird balance of pressure and trying to figure that out, and it's nice to hear you say maybe take a little bit of time. Don't think that the minute we get, our handshake with you, we have to know
Right.
exactly what we're doing.
No, that's right. Yeah, that was a great speech. That was David Habiger, who
Yeah.
was a graduate of ours and has been a wildly successful, entrepreneur and CEO. But he was talking about having taken a pass on an opportunity that might have ultimately resulted in him running Tesla, Motors, and so it was funny on the one hand, but it was very telling on the other.
Yeah.
So, and that's, I think, still available on the web if people Google that.
Yeah.
The 2016
Great
St.
speech.
Norbert commencement speech. It really was outstanding.
Yeah. So I want to talk about you a little bit to
Okay.
finish up.
My
So,
favorite subject.
Yeah. Can you tell me about what you're most proud of in your last 9 years at St. Norbert? Easy question. Is it still 9 years into one proud moment?
Well, it's a hard one to answer. It's a hard one to answer compactly.
Mm.
I mean, on one hand, I'm very, very proud of the fact that we have been able to, more or less, kind of overhaul, renovate, upgrade the campus pretty dramatically. It was a wonderful campus when I got here, and there was a lot going on. But we've really been fortunate with so much support from our friends that we have been able to, build a new science building. We're just getting ready to open the Malva Family Fitness and Sports Center, which is going to speak to, sort of the non-academic health and well-being of our students. It was something we really, really needed. Got a beautiful new library, a beautiful new cafeteria. I mean, we've been fortunate in so many ways. So I'm very proud of that because, without these things, the long-term viability of the institution, might have been in some question. As it is, our future's never been brighter. So I'm proud of that. I'm proud of the fact that all has been accomplished at a time. I mean, about 2 months after I got here, the global economy went right over a waterfall,
Yeah.
and we were dealing with a couple of years of deep recession, and yet, right from the start, that support was there. It never really held us back, so I was very proud of that. We've had a lot of new programs. I mean, the collaborations that we've had with the medical college, for instance, has been groundbreaking, and it's paying a lot of dividends. But, what I'm most proudest of, I think, are the people, both in terms of the students, because with each year, each incoming class, is even more academically accomplished. It seems more studious, more serious about why it wants to be here, and it's more diverse. The interest in the sciences is increasing dramatically, and and our business program, which has always been strong, is stronger than ever. Still have an outstanding teacher ed. So I'm just really proud of that. I'm proud of the students, and I'm really proud of our faculty and staff. When I was talking about coming to St. Norbert 9 years ago and didn't know a lot about it, I started looking at the faculty first, and I was really knocked out by the quality of the faculty. And if anything, it's even stronger today. And so, at the end of the day, a college is about its people, and especially its faculty. And, I'd put us up against anybody. So I would say those are the things that I feel best about.
Is there anything that you wish you could change about your time here or regret about your time here?
Oh, probably there might be a few do-overs, but not really.
Yeah.
I think, one of the reasons, people may not realize that the average college presidency today is down to about 6 or 7 years. I've done 9. They're inherently hard jobs, and most of the people that do them are people like me, and that you sort of don't go halvesies. You tend to throw yourself into these jobs, and so even though as you get older you learn how to pace yourself a little bit, but if college presidency years were dog years, you know, it feels like 50
Yeah.
sometimes. And for me, I feel like the things that I hope we could accomplish when I came, I mean, one of the reasons I wanted to come was because I just felt like there was so much upside potential. And have really tried to realize as much of that upside potential here as I felt and I think we've done an awful lot. So I have no regrets about that. I have no regrets about the effort. There are some things I would do differently in retrospect, I'm sure. But in general, I mean, my feeling has always been, heck, let's try it if something sounds like a good idea. And, you know, it's usually worked out. I mean, it always work out, but if it doesn't, you know, we'll try something else. At least we learn something. And I've been very appreciative with my trustees, with our alums, with my faculty and staff, that there's been a tremendous readiness to try stuff. At a lot of colleges, even with good ideas, people say, you know, why bother? You know, things are fine. I hate that. And here, our default position, at least in my time, has been, if it's a good idea, our default position is to try and figure out how to do it. That's outstanding. And, you know, that's the kind of environment that I really enjoy. And it's allowed for a lot of the things that I talked about earlier to be possible. And so even though it's been just 9 years, it's been a pretty packed 9 years. And again, I feel like we've been able to accomplish a lot. More in that time than a lot of other schools would have done in 25 years. And, you know, I can live with that.
It feels like that just in my 4 years here. It's amazing to see how what's changed. And when you get, you know, alums that come on the tours, and they're just blown away. They don't recognize the campus. So when do you think you feel most successful personally?
Well, on a personal level, I think, you know, you have to look at, you know, yourself, your life, your relationships. I mean, Deb and I have 4 fabulous daughters that we're so proud of, and they in turn have married wonderful young men. We've got grandkids on the way. I mean, you know, knock wood, just so thankful that, you know, kind of despite, I mean, their dad was pretty preoccupied for a long time. They were very fortunate in their mother. And, you know, Deb and I are really, really proud of what we have been able to build, you know, on the personal side. And I feel like I'm proud of the fact that, because I grew up in a place not terribly unlike Green Bay. It was warm and a lot of family and friends, but kind of provincial. I mean, I was never on an airplane, a jet plane, until I was 23 years old, I don't think. So I'm really proud of the fact that, having come from that kind of a traditional background, that I've had opportunities to get educated, to write books, to be in high levels of management and in the private sector and in higher ed. So I am very proud of that. But, you know, at the end of the day, especially as a college president, you know, you have to look and see, well, you were the steward of this institution for almost a decade. Is the institution better than you found it? Is it stronger than you found it? Is it going in the right direction? Are you doing that consistent with your mission and your tradition? And are you doing a good job for your students? I feel good about all that. I think certainly there are things that we could do better, and I know Brian Brees, my successor, is going to do a fantastic job. But on the whole, I feel good about our record, and I do take pride in that. I think that's a reckoning I can live with.
Is there a trait or a quality that you think you have that has, you know, that has enabled you to be so successful? Is it just your work ethic, your tenacity, or is it something else?
Well, I have capacity for hard work. It's not always straight line hard work. I can certainly get sidetracked, and I can procrastinate with the best of them. But I do ultimately, you know, I'm not afraid to put in the time. I think I have my inquisitiveness. You know, my mom named me Thomas, and she got so tired. By the time I was 6, she got so tired of me questioning her. She said, "I think we realized when we named you Thomas that, you know, we had you pegged because you seem to doubt everything that you hear." But I think that sense of inquisitiveness and curiosity, skepticism, has that's really helped me, in part because I'm inherently shy, actually, and so
okay.
but it's hard to be successful in journalism as a shy
Yeah.
journalist, and so it made me kind of get out of that shell and to be comfortable talking to anybody and even to ask them hard questions. So that was great. Frankly, a strong sense of insecurity. I mean, most successful people, I think, down deep, have a pretty healthy sense of insecurity, because that's a big part of the thing that fuels their drive, you know, to prove over and over that they don't need to be insecure. They can accomplish things. They do have capabilities, and I've been able to tap into that, but that's still there. But then you tap into it as a manager also, because I'm managing a lot of really talented people that also have insecurities. So, you know, so there was some self-knowledge there. Mostly, I just was fortunate. I had lots and lots of opportunities. I had, from the time I was 16 years old, I've worked for people who saw something that they were willing to give me a chance. And, you know, I mean, when you get the chance, you have to deliver, but you also need the chance. And I've just, my whole life, I've had those chances, and I feel really fortunate. So.
The last question I have for you is, what's next now that you have a little bit of a reprieve, hopefully?
Yeah, well, Deb and I, you know, as we're speaking today, you know, we're, you know, about 7 weeks or so from, you know, our commencement.
Mm-hmm.
So we're winding down in a sense, although it's really busy. But we're very much looking forward, on the one hand, really looking forward to it. We've never had any second thoughts about this being the right decision at the right time. But we're also getting pretty melancholy about the fact that, you know, our term here is nearly over. So it's, you know, it's pretty bittersweet. Excited about the opportunity. I mean, even though I'm retiring, you know, I'm not going to be presidenting anymore. I'm going to expect to stay pretty busy. I'm going to write, and many of your friends know that I'm going to write a short book about St. Norbert, our patron. We don't have a very good version of it. We don't have a good English language version of his life, really, and so this is a book that could be a first-year book or something. It's, looking for, it'll keep me connected to the school, but I won't be underfoot for Brian, and so that's good. I'm already working on the idea of what the next book project would be after that. That would be a more conventionally commercial book that I'm kind of trying to line up. So I expect to stay busy writing and looking forward to writing, but on a schedule that is more in my own control and not trying to run a college at the same time. And how long I'll be able to do that, I don't know. I mean, I have good health, I'm fortunate, and I still feel like I have energy, but I'm also at that point where every other person I see on TV, I actually know who they are, but I can't remember their name. So I'm going, holy crap, you know, they're going to take my keyboard away from me one of these days. So it's a little bit of a race against the clock, but that's what I'll be doing. And yeah, I'm looking forward to having the freedom to write again, but do it in a way that somebody else can be worrying about the future of the college.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, that's all I have, President Kunkel.
Okay.
Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about?
Well, no, thank you. I'm just, this was a great conversation. Well, I shouldn't say that, because you have to decide if it's a great conversation.
Up to you.
But great questions. I'm really admiring of you and the program, this initiative that you've undertaken. And I think it's, in some ways, kind of indicative of what I was saying earlier. I just think I marvel at the creativity and the social responsibility, frankly, that so many of our students demonstrate. And one of the great things, I mean, when I was your age, you know, we didn't get to decide what media were. I mean, media were what they were, and you know, it was run by the people that buy the truckload, and you know, and had FCC licenses. And your generation gets to decide, you know, what news is and what media are, and to see it done creatively and respectfully and toward a constructive purpose is just really gratifying. So,
Thank you.
anyway, I'm flattered to be asked.